My left headlight and my right headlight, properly mounted and secure, clear in color, not cracked, broken, or missing. This is an older model truck. My turn signal, four-way flasher, and marker light on the right and the left, properly mounted and secure, amber colors, not cracked, broken, or missing. My clearance lights over my cab, properly mounted and secure, not cracked, broken, or missing, and they are also amber in color. My coolant reservoir. It is properly mounted and secure with nuts and bolts. It is not cracked, broken, or leaking. My coolant should be within 3 inches of the cap. My hoses, properly mounted and secure. They are not cut, torn, frayed, or leaking. My alternator, properly mounted and secure with nuts and bolts. It is not cracked, broke, or loose, and the wires going to my alternator are properly mounted and secure. They are not cut, torn, frayed, and there's no corrosion on the terminals. My belt is properly mounted and secure. It is not cut, torn, frayed, and when pressed, it should have no more than a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch of deflection. My water pump on this truck right down here, it is properly mounted and secure with nuts and bolts. It is not cracked, broken, or leaking. And my water pump is belt driven. My lower and my upper radiator hose, properly mounted and secure with clamps. They are not cut, torn, frayed, or leaking. My exhaust back here behind the turbo, properly mounted and secure with nuts, bolts, and clamps. There's no cracks and no holes and no soot trail to indicate a leak. I'm gonna do A, and then I'll do B. So this is part A. If I was to pull my dipstick, I would pull it, check it, make sure it was clean, had no metal shavings. And if it was at the add mark or below, I would add 1 gallon at a time and check it after each gallon. My air compressor, properly mounted and secure with nuts and bolts. It is not cracked, broken, or leaking, and my air compressor is gear driven. All my hoses, properly mounted and secure. They are not cut, torn, frayed, or leaking. My power steering pump is directly below my air compressor. It is properly mounted and secure with nuts and bolts. It is not cracked, broken, or leaking. My power steering pump is also gear driven, and all the hoses going to and from, properly mounted and secure, not cut, torn, frayed, or leaking. My steering rod or steering shaft, properly mounted and secure. It is not twisted, bent, or damaged, and it has no excessive play. My U-joint, properly mounted and secure with a nut and bolt. It is not twisted, bent, or broken. Power steering reservoir, properly mounted and secure with nuts and bolts. It is not cracked, broken, or leaking. If I could not see the level, I would remove the cap and check my dipstick on the cap. My power steering gearbox is properly mounted and secured to the frame with nuts and bolts. That's the one thing you gotta mention, mounted to the frame. So my power steering gearbox, properly mounted and secured to the frame with nuts and bolts. It is not cracked, broken, or leaking. So my frame, front to back, properly mounted and secured with nuts and bolts. It is not twisted, bent, or damaged, and it has no illegal welds. My shock absorber, properly mounted and secured with nuts and bolts, not twisted, bent, or damaged, and it's not leaking. My spring hanger, you can call it spring hanger or spring mount, I'll take either word, front and back, properly mounted and secured with nuts and bolts, not cracked, broke, or damaged. My bushing within, properly mounted and secured with nut and bolt. It is not cracked, broken, or missing. My leaf springs, properly mounted and secure, not cracked, broke, missing, shifted, or misaligned, and they are held in place with 2 U-bolts and 4 nuts, and they are not cracked, broken, or loose. My pitman arm, drag link, steering knuckle, tie rod, and tie rod ends are all properly mounted and secure with castle nuts and cotter keys, and they are not twisted, bent, or broken. My air line coming to my brake chamber, properly mounted and secure, not cut, torn, frayed, or leaking. My brake chamber itself, properly mounted and secure with a nut, bolt, and a clamp. It's not dented, cracked, or leaking. My slack adjuster, my push rod, and my push pin are all properly mounted and secure, not twisted, bent, or damaged. If I wanted to test my push rod, I would chalk my wheels, release my brakes, and I should have no more than 1 inch of pull on my push rod. Brake drum, brake lining, properly mounted and secure, not cracked, broken, or damaged. There is no oil, grease, or contaminant inside my drum that could affect my braking. My brake lining should be no less than 1/4 inch thick. My inner rim, outer rim, no dents, no cracks, and no illegal welds. My sidewalls, no cuts, no tears, no bulges. My tread is evenly worn. My tread should be no less than 4/32 deep. The bead of my tire is seated to my rim and it is not leaking. My valve stem, properly mounted and secure, not twisted, bent, damaged, or leaking. It should have a cap. If I was to check my tire pressure, it should be no less than 100 psi. All my lug nuts, properly mounted and secure, not cracked, broken, or missing. There's no rust trails to indicate looseness, no shiny threads indicating cross threading, no distortion around the nuts showing excessive wear on my rim. My hub seal, properly mounted and secure with nuts and bolts. It is not cracked, broken, or leaking. If I wanted to check the oil level, I'd pull the cap, stick my finger in it, and check the oil. And that'd be the end of part A.